Welcome back everyone to another video. So this time round I'm going to be doing another print in paint just for a change, and it's going to be another Star Wars one. This time I've gone for a clone trooper. This is a heavy trooper from Galactic Armory, and this is a really nice one. I'm looking forward to doing this one. I've had him on the back burner for a little while. I've had him printed out, just waiting around to getting around to finally printing him. So he's held together with elastic bands at the moment. I've printed him in 1/6 scale. I have primed him white for the most part, apart from his gun, which obviously I've primed in black. The hands are actually attached to the gun, hence why they're also black. I haven't done anything with the base yet. This was the original, this was just the raw plastic, so the whole model was this colour, which printing in this lighter colour did make priming him in white a bit easier, because priming in white is horrendous. I used Citadel's White Scar primer. I did not enjoy the process. I had to do several coats just to get it to really sort of adhere. Anyway, we are where we are. I'm going to likely go over the white anyway as I come and do the pieces, because you can see like the arm here isn't quite the right shade of white as the rest, where the primer didn't quite adhere. So I'll be tidying that up as I go along. Anyway, just give you a quick look at the model. As I say, he's a nice one, this one, because he's got a lot of detail on him. A lot of the clones don't tend to have, so he's a bit more interesting looking. Legs, standard, not much going on there, but he does have this nice ammo belt. He has these, I guess, the sort of armor plates around his chest and shoulder. He has I guess that's an ammo stack there, but of course the big selling point for me is the massive cannon. Obviously we don't see this in the movie, but we do see this in the Clone Wars shows, the TV cartoon and CGI shows, and I guess that's the type of helmet that the heavy troopers would wear. And he's got a backpack, and he does have the skirt and also the satchel. So I think when he's all painted up, there's enough little details and enough extra colours that will go on him, so he won't just be sort of a plain white trooper. Okay, I haven't really got any particular idea how I'm going to paint this. I will just take it as I see it. So without any further ado, let's get cracking. So with the model disassembled, the first thing I'm going to do is touch up the model parts where the primer didn't quite reach. So what I'm going to do is take some White Scar paint, which is the same colour of primer that I used by Citadel. So whatever primer you use, try and make sure that you can get an equivalent paint so the whites will match. And then, because this paint is very thin, what I'm going to do is actually apply it with a dry brush type method, but more of a heavy dry brush. So then you'll see that it goes on quite nicely and smooth. If you try to apply this with just a normal brush, it would become really streaky and it'd be really difficult to try and get an even coat because the paint is so thin. So whenever you've got a really thin paint, yellows is another one. It's much easier to do it like this. You get such better results. With the armour tidied up, I'm going to take some black paint and start blocking in the undersuit in between the armour. So all the black parts are now done. So what I'm going to do now is go over that with a light grey. I'm going to use Dawnstone grey, and I'm going to just dry brush over that just to leave a bit of colour on the highlights, just to give it a bit more interest. So after that dry brushing, you can just see that it's kind of picked out the ridges of the bodysuit underneath, just gives it a little bit more interest, stops it looking flat. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the back skirt, also the flap on the backpack. So I'm just going to use Mechanicus standard grey, but obviously any type of grey you've got will be just fine. I'm going to take a fairly big brush, as this is a fairly big area. Obviously thin down. I'll probably do a couple of coats just to get a nice coverage. So with that grey done, I'm now going to start adding in a bit of a dry brush of a lighter grey. I'm going to go with Dawnstone again, and it's just a case of lightly brushing over, trying to catch all the raised edges. And then that's followed up by a second dry brush of a slightly lighter grey, in this case Administratum grey, and I'm just going to try and focus this more on areas that I think would catch the light, and also a bit more towards the bottom just to show that it's a bit more sort of ragged. Finally, I'm going to take some Rhinox hide, which is a very dark brown, and I'm going to get it to dry brush consistency again on my brush, but instead of dry brushing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start stippling on the bottom here, just to give it a bit of sort of dirt, just to give it again a bit more interest, kind of make it sort of look a bit more logical. You can see it takes a bit of time, but just keep stabbing away, and you'll start to build up quite a realistic looking, sort of dusty dirt looking. And hopefully the camera's picking that up. That's kind of the finished result. As I say, it's subtle, which is what you want to go for. It just gives that little bit of grubbiness realism. Okay, next thing I'm going to do now, as you'll see the sort of the outline of the skirt, the trim. I haven't painted that, so let's do that next. So I've opted for Magic Blue, which is the same colour I'm going to use on some of the armour panels. So now it's just a case of going over those trim on the skirt and also the trim around the backpack. I'm now going to take some Drakenhof Nightshade and I'm just going to apply that all over that blue we just put on, which will just darken it down and it'll give it a little bit more depth. Okay, so the wash is now dried, and what I'm going to do is take a bit of that original colour blue that we started with, and I'm just going to get a lot of it off the brush and just stipple in a couple of the areas. So areas where the wash has kind of dried a bit thick in places, and I'm just going to sort of tidy that up by stippling over. Might take a couple of passes, but eventually you'll get a much cleaner, more natural result. Next I'm going to take a lighter shade of blue, and what I'm going to do is stipple it across all of that blue again. Now this is, as it's just a little bit lighter, what effect that should start to give is a slightly tattered look. Just work it around, depending how heavy or light you want to go is really up to you. And finally, using that same light coloured blue, I'm going to do a edge highlight around the corners and of all the skirt, just to reflect the light. Next I'm going to take some Gorgon Brown from Vallejo and I'm going to start painting in the knapsack and the strap that goes alongside it. Next I want to take some Parasite Brown and do a rather light dry brush across that brown that we've just done, and trying to concentrate on the raised areas. So that dry brush has now given us some nice tonal shifts. I'm just going to take that up a notch by putting in a bit of sandry dust and doing again another very light dry brush around the edges, just to bring that out just that little bit more. With that last dry brush applied, you can see it's really brought out the detail now in that brown leather bag. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is the straps around the front here, and I'm going to use a Rhinox hide, which is a very dark brown, and I'm just going to cover that in. Now I have just done some stippling of a lighter brown again across those straps, just to bring out a bit more detail. So next thing I'm going to do is take some silver. Silver I'm using is Vallejo gunmetal. And I'm going to now do the silver catches across here, and I'm also going to paint in these ammunition parts on the belt and buckles, and also I think there's a couple of little studs on the back, on the bag, sorry, and on the backpack as well. And now it's just a case of putting a black wash over those silver highlights, so good old Nuln Oil or any other black wash you have. Turning to the gun, I'm going to just do a dry brush of grey all over. I'm just going to do a medium Dawn Stone Grey from Citadel Paints, and it's just a case of making sure you got most of the paint off the brush and just going around the edges. Okay, so after that dry brush, you can see that it's picked out all the edges. What I'm going to do now is take a little bit of sponge and dip it into some silver paint and just sponge away most of the excess till we're just leaving, yeah, that's good, little drops. And then it's just a case of picking where you want to go around, generally sort of the edges where you think it's going to pick up more sort of battle damage, and just going around sponging it on. Okay, so with that silver applied, this is what you're left with. Star Wars guns are always quite easy to do because generally they are just pure black, so just a little bit of weathering on and you're done. So what I'm going to do now is start putting on some armor plating. So I'm going to use the magic blue again, and what I'm going to do is just pick out a few panels of his armor and paint it over blue. You can't really go too wrong with this because I've looked up sort of reference pictures and whatnot, and no two clones ever look the same really, so you can feel free to sort of make up your own design really. I like blue, so that's what we're going to go with. Okay, so I've put in all the blue markings I want to do. I kind of just made it up as I went along really. I followed a couple of pictures online to sort of give me some ideas, but yeah, as I say, you can't really go too wrong. So last couple of bits to do now is just all going to be in grey. I'm going to do the armor plating here and here, and the bullet casings along there. I'm probably going to do a black outline around the side, and then it'll probably just be a case of a couple of highlights of silver dots for the rivets, and probably dry brush in a lighter grey as well. And also I noticed that there's a couple of straps around this arm here, so again I'm going to do a mix of different shades of grey, and also probably paint in that little pouch at the top. So that's all those last armor plates done. But when I've taken a look at it, I kind of thought the actual body itself is a kind of plain. I didn't sort of do any blue colouring on that. So all I've gone and done is I've put some Tamiya modelling tape down, just marked out a couple of lines. And I'm just going to paint across and just add a couple of stripes down the model. Okay, so moment of truth. Let's see if these stripes come out okay. Got a little bit of bleed on the first one. That one's not too bad. There. I think that's come out okay actually. I can tidy up that little bit. And yeah, I think that's pretty much where I wanted them to be. Okay, cool. So with that done, that is all the blue armor markings done. Now what I've been doing is playing around with some ideas on how to sort of weather it down. So this is the level of weathering that I think I'm happy with. There's a couple of steps to create this. Obviously it's a case of sort of chipping the blue painted armor to show the white underneath, and then also dirtying down and marking in all the recesses of the white armor. So I think that's about the level I want, so I'm going to now do that for the rest of the model. So no surprises, anyone who sort of done this kind of thing before will probably know where I'm going to start. Now, to take a bit of sponge, put some of the white scar paint that I originally did the actual armour in, and then dab it, get off as much as you need, and then I'll demonstrate on the helmet. And then all it is, you just want to basically focus on kind of the edges, the corners more, and just go around the model. I might put a bit too much on there. Just stipple it on until you're happy with the level you've got. You can go heavier in some places, lighter in others. It's really up to you. So just a case of having fun, what makes logical sense to you. And you should get something like that. So now I'm just going to go around every part of blue paneling that I've done all over the armour and carry on like this. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is make a black wash to dirty down the armour. So I've got a couple of drops of black paint in here. You don't need very much at all, but what you do need is quite a lot of water. So let's see how that comes out. Let's mix the two up. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so let's go back to the helmet again. And what we're going to do is basically slap this on all over. Let's try and, in fact, let's get a bigger brush than that. We're going to slap this on all over the model. Trying to get it into all the recesses. And as we apply it, just let it sit for a couple of seconds. You want to take a sponge and then just start sponging it off. Because we want to leave a bit of grime, but we don't want to go too far with it. So just trying to get that sort of sweet spot in between. So yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Starting to fill into the recesses and bring out a bit more detail. So I'm going to carry on doing that around the whole model, around all the parts that are white, and then we'll pick it up where we come off after that. So I've now glued most of him together, put his arms, backpack and legs on. So now I can start looking at the base. I've left the gun on at the moment just to make life a bit easier. So when I've put him onto the base, I noticed that his pegs didn't align. Sometimes you get this. I don't think it was the way I printed it. I think it just hasn't quite been measured up correctly when they did the cuts for the sculpt. Anyway, it's a simple enough fix. What I've done is I filled up the hole temporarily, well, I said temporarily, permanently, with quick dry and polyfiller, and I've just sawn off the peg that was on that foot, and I think he's okay. I think that he's stable enough. The gun might add an extra bit of weight onto the front, but I think pushing him forward, I don't think he's going to fall in any way. And worst case scenario, I can glue him in place if I need to. So what I'm going to do now, I don't want to just have a completely flat base. I want a textured base. So we're going to do my old-fashioned trick again of covering the whole base in some PVA wood glue. And then I'm going to cover the whole lot in a mix of sand and small little pebbles to give it a nice earthy, rocky base. And after all that glue is dried, that's what you're left with. So obviously you can see where the foot pegs are, and I think that's come out okay. It's got enough rough texture for some dry brushing to catch hold of. So all I'm going to do now is spray paint the whole thing black, and then I'm going to throw a coat of, I'm going to go with satin varnish over the whole thing. So it'll give the base rim a nice clean reflective look. and then I will come in and paint over the top of here.
So we're back at the painting table. I have finished the priming and the varnishing on the base. So this is what I'm left with, which you know looks pretty good as is, but it's not the right colour I want. So what I want to do, I'm going to paint it over. Start with a purple, night, and then I'm probably going to dry brush it with some pink horror because I want a pink and purple base, and there's a particular reason for that, which I will come to later. So I'm going to start off with some purple, making sure that I don't hit the base rim. Actually, a quick deviation, I'm going to do a dry brush of Screamer Pink over that purple to start with, just to try and bring up the colour a little bit. I'm going to follow that up with a dry brush of Slanesh Grey, which is, despite the name being grey, is actually a light purple. And now finally a dry brush of Pink Horror over the whole thing, just to give it that final little bit of brightness. And here is the finished base. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to glue the model into the base. I decided I will glue it in because he's not the most stable when he stood on there. Last thing you want it to do is fall over after all that hard work. So I'm going to glue him in and then I will show you the final result.
And here he is as the final reveal. So as I say, I did glue him onto the base in the end, just to give him that bit of extra stability. Just turn him around. Yeah, this is a really nice statue, this one. Say, fairly easy to put together. All the cuts are in nice hidden places. Now, as I mentioned, there was a reason I did the base in this colour. Now, I've actually tried to base it on the planet Teth from the Clone Wars movie, and it's a companion piece to this guy, who's also on similar style base. So now I've got the two of them facing off against each other. This was actually a model kit. There's a video on my channel showing how I made this one. But this is what I love about the 3D printing. It gives you so much ability to customize things how you want them. And you can, you know, really put together a collection that is truly unique to yourself, you know. So yeah, I think that the two of them look quite good together. This won't be my last clone. I've got a couple other ones printed up. It probably take me a little while to get around to doing them. A couple of different things I want to try. I must admit, I prefer doing models that are wearing clothes rather than armour. Armour can be, it's not the most interesting things to paint at times. Just from a painting point of view, don't get me wrong, the models look fantastic. I like all the troopers. But yeah, from a painting point of view, I do prefer things that have a bit more interest and texture to them. So I'll leave a link in the description where I got this model from. If you're interested in it, I invite you to go and have a look. I don't think you'll regret it. So I hope you found this as interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.